Before America paved its cities, urban life was a swamp with buildings around it. That is not an exaggeration. In wet weather, city streets turned into mud deep enough to trap wagon wheels and lame horses. In dry weather, the same roads turned into choking dust mixed with pulverized manure. A busy 19th century street carried drays, omnibuses, freight wagons, hand carts, riders, loose dogs, drovers, and thousands of horses every day. All of it grinding into the roadbed, all of it turning movement itself into a daily fight. And that meant the growth of American cities depended on a problem most people now never think about. Not railroads, not skyscrapers, not even sewers, not yet. The ground. The simple question of whether a wagon loaded with flour, coal, beer, brick, or dressed meat could get from one end of town to the other without breaking an axle in the mud. The answer, for decades, was labor on a scale almost nobody remembers. Men cut granite into blocks by hand, fired brick by the millions, hauled stone from quarries and yards into growing cities, graded roads with picks and shovels, built drainage beds, set curbs, laid paving block after paving block into sand and crushed stone until whole neighborhoods changed underfoot. Streets that had been springtime bogs became hard surfaces. Wheel traffic sped up. Fire engines moved faster. Streetcars ran steadier. Deliveries became more reliable. Commerce got heavier. Cities got bigger because the ground finally held. Before asphalt came to dominate the American street, the country built modern movement with hand-laid stone. If you care about the labor that built this country in ordinary places, the work so constant and practical that later generations stopped seeing it, subscribe to Global Old History right now. This channel is about the hidden systems, the men under the visible progress, the things every city depended on and almost nobody now thinks to honor. Stay with me, because the story of American paving is really the story of how cities stopped drowning in themselves. Here is the problem as the 19th century understood it. A dirt road is fine until traffic becomes relentless. A muddy farm lane might be inconvenient. A muddy commercial street is a civic failure. It slows everything: food, fuel, freight, mail, construction material, street cleaning, ambulances when they existed, fire response, even the simple daily act of crossing town in decent shoes. Multiply that by growth. American cities in the 19th century were exploding outward and upward. Immigration, trade, manufacturing, ports, rail links, warehouses, markets, new neighborhoods. More people meant more wagons. More wagons meant deeper ruts. More horses meant more manure. More rain meant worse surfaces. The street stopped being scenery and became infrastructure. And infrastructure needed engineering. That is where paving crews came in. The public sees the top layer, the finished street. But paving began below the visible surface. Crews first had to cut and shape the roadbed. That meant digging out the bad material, leveling the line, and making sure the street had crown, a slight rise in the middle so water would run off instead of sitting in the travel path. Drainage was not decorative, it was survival. A paved surface without drainage would fail in its own filth. After grading came the foundation. Depending on city, budget, and era, crews used compacted earth, improved with broken stone, gravel, sand, or layered base material. A good street was built in courses, not just covered. The base mattered because the real enemy was not only mud from above, but movement from below. Traffic pounded every weakness. If the foundation pumped, settled, or held water, the surface broke apart. Then came the paving itself. In some cities and periods, wood block had its moment. In others, brick dominated. But for hard-wearing traffic streets, granite sets and stone block became the symbol of durability. Each block had to be cut, sized, transported, and set by hand. Not perfectly, not like machine-made modern units, but closely enough that the surface locked together and spread the load. That is one of the details I want you to picture clearly. A paving street was not one machine doing a dramatic thing. It was repetition, endless repetition. A man bending, lifting, placing, tapping, adjusting, and moving on to the next block. Another spreading sand, another aligning courses, another working a rammer, another hauling loads in from the wagon, another dressing edges, another setting curb. A finished block of street might represent thousands upon thousands of small human motions. And the materials themselves fought back. Granite is durable because it is hard. It is miserable to shape because it is hard. Quarrymen had to drill, split, and rough out the stone before city crews ever touched it. Block cutters and dressers worked with hammers, chisels, plugs, feathers, and skill learned the slow way. Brick had different demands. It had to be dug as clay, molded, dried, fired, hauled, and stacked. Either way, the street below the city foot traffic began somewhere else as another man's brutal labor. So when you look at an old paved street, you are really looking at two worlds of work laid on top of each other. Quarry or yard labor on one end, city paving labor on the other. The paving gangs themselves worked in all weather short of the kind that made the job impossible. Hot days on open streets could feel like working inside reflected light. Wet days turned the unset sections nasty and slick. Winter made handling stone punishing on the hands. Traffic never fully stopped, which meant crews often worked with the city pressing around them, carts rerouted, pedestrians complaining, horses shying, merchants demanding access, foremen trying to keep line and pace at once. Because pace mattered. A city street under improvement was expensive twice over, expensive to build and expensive to keep disrupted. So crews had to move. Materials had to arrive in order. The foundation had to be prepared right. The block layers had to keep their rhythm. If the wagons bringing stone lagged, men stood idle. If the base was wrong, the surface team lost time. If the weather broke badly, the whole job could go sideways in money and schedule. This is why old paving was part craftsmanship and part urban warfare. The crew boss had to understand not just the material, but the street as a living place. Traffic load, water flow, slope, width, cart turns, curb lines, access to businesses. In a port city, for example, the pavement near warehouses and wharves took a savage beating from loaded freight drays. In market districts, the mud and waste made surface breakdown worse. In dense neighborhoods, the street needed to serve commercial movement without becoming a trench every spring. And once a city began paving in earnest, it rarely wanted to go back, because the change was too obvious. A paved street was cleaner, though no 19th century city was truly clean by modern standards. It was faster. It was louder, too. Iron tires on stone could sound like a punishment from heaven. But it worked. Wagons rolled more predictably. Mud seasons eased. Property values changed. Shopkeepers liked reliable access. Municipal officials liked the appearance of progress. Residents learned quickly which streets had become respectable and which were still chaos after rain. That is something old city people understood in their bones. Pavement changed status. One quick ask from me. If this is the kind of hidden infrastructure story you came for, subscribe right now. This channel lives on labor stories like this, the systems under the city, the work that made ordinary life possible. One click helps more than you think. Now let me show you the street itself as a finished object. A properly paved 19th century city street was built to take punishment from horseshoes, wagon wheels, steel-rimmed loads, and weather. The crown sent water outward, gutters carried runoff along the edges, curbs defined the line, stone or brick formed the running surface. Maintenance crews later repaired failed sections, reset blocks, filled joints, and handled subsidence. Streets were never done forever. They were held in working order by continuous municipal attention, at least in cities rich enough and disciplined enough to keep paying for it. And what did those streets make possible? Everything got heavier. That sounds like a small point, but it matters. A city with poor roads has a practical weight limit, not officially on paper, but in everyday use. The worse the road, the harder it is to move building stone, coal, machinery, barrels, cast iron, timber, food, beer, printing presses, market produce, and all the other dense stuff that makes a city live. Good paving raised the carrying capacity of the city itself. It meant more freight per wagon, more reliable schedules, less animal exhaustion in the worst seasons, and fewer catastrophic failures in the middle of commerce. That meant industry could grow, markets could function more smoothly, construction could intensify. Street railway systems operated better on improved surfaces. Fire departments benefited from more dependable routes. Mail got through with less drama. Urban government, for all its usual corruption and inefficiency, could point at a paved district and say, "Here is progress you can stand on." And yes, the labor that made it happen was often immigrant labor, seasonal labor, contract labor, or municipal day labor, men whose names vanished into payroll books if they were written at all. The city remembered the boulevard opening, the mayor's speech, the commercial benefit. It did not much remember the men bent over the block line in August heat, lifting 10-pound and 20-pound pieces all day until their backs went tight and their wrists went dull. That forgottenness is part of why I like this story, because everybody sees the old street, the postcard street, the preserved downtown, the alley still surfaced in granite, the old brick lane behind market buildings. They admire the look. They call it charming. What they do not always think about is the original reason it existed, which was not charm. It was force, load, filth, weather, necessity. Cities paved because mud was choking them. There was human cost too, of course. Stone handling wrecked backs and fingers. Quarry dust and yard dust hurt lungs. Horses and wagons injured men in haulage. Rammers and hammers punished joints. Street work in live traffic always risked crushed feet, sudden impacts, and endless minor injuries. A paving season could leave a crewman half broken by autumn. The city gained a durable surface by spending durable men. And then, over time, the next material came. Asphalt rose because it was quieter, smoother, and in many cases better suited to the newer city of bicycles, automobiles, and different traffic demands. The older block surfaces did not vanish at once. Many remained. Some still remain. But the visual and acoustic symbol of the 19th century city, iron on stone, gradually gave way to a different urban ground. That transition hides a strange truth. For a period of American history, the sound of modernity was not the hum of tires. It was the crash and ring of wheels and shoes on stone pavement. Listen hard enough in an old district where block still survives, and you can almost hear it. Not nostalgia. Pressure. Freight. Horses. Men shouting. Metal striking stone. That was the city learning how to carry itself. Here is the image I want to leave you with. A downtown street in the 1880s after rain. Half the block still old earth and rut, slick with muck and manure. The other half under construction. Wagons drawn up with stone, men in aprons and work shirts bent over the line, setting block into sand. A foreman sighting the grade, another man tamping the course. Curbstones newly set. Water already beginning to behave differently on the finished side, slipping toward the gutter instead of collecting in the travel path. A merchant in the doorway, watching because his business depends on the street getting done. A horse stamping near the wagon shafts, iron ringing on stone. The city literally hardening under its own weight. That is what paving was, not decoration, not nostalgia. A decision by growing American cities to stop living in mud and start building surfaces strong enough to hold commerce, horses, people, and the future. If someone in your family worked roads, quarries, brickyards, or city crews, tell me in the comments. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.